highlighting the importance of focusing on endemic and resilient crops in individual nations, as well as partnerships with regions and adaptation when it comes to both crops and the other parts of the agricultural sector. Ladies and gentlemen, we now turn our focus to a pivotal theme: environment, sustainability, and climate change adaptation. Through the next two panels in this theme, we look to explore innovative solutions, proactive strategies, and collaborative efforts that aimed at safeguarding our planet and building a sustainable future for generations to come. Our first panel will examine proactive measures and strategic initiatives undertaken by the Asia-Pacific region in responses to the challenges posed by climate change. Dr. Ravi Fernando's focus is strategic corporate sustainability and strategic national sustainability, and believes that for a tipping point to be achieved in sustainability, we need nations and businesses to embed it in their national and corporate strategies. He's a board director of Dilma, Ceylon Tea, LOLC, Melster Corp, Aitken Spence Plantation, and Aitken Spence Hotels. Dr. Anil Jayasinghe has 29 years of hands-on experience in health administration, culminating in the position of DGHS Sri Lanka, which is the topmost technical position in the Ministry of Health. He navigates promotive, preventative, curative, and rehabilitative health services in Sri Lanka. Johan Lawrence is a sustainability lead at the Hydromani Apparel and Secretary General of the Joint Apparel Association Forum. Hydromani, a pioneering force in the end-to-end apparel solutions operates in Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. Leveraging premium production capabilities, innovative discovery labs, and a skilled global network. This panel will be moderated by Meghna Datta, a founding partner of Studio Decode, an award-winning architecture and urban design firm. Welcome, panel.
Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the panel on climate change leadership. Southeast Asia is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change, as you all know, and it faces high risk in rising sea levels, waves, floods, and droughts, and increasingly intense and unpredictable weather events. We also know that climate change doesn't affect everyone equally. Women often bear the brunt and face higher risks and burden from impacts of climate change, as they are responsible for household energy, food, water, and care. And with specific focus to Sri Lanka, more than 50% of the workforce is agriculture, and in agriculture, more than 50% are women. So today we're going to talk about partnerships with countries in Asia-Pacific region of how to mitigate climate change, public-private partnerships, implementation challenges, capacity building, and gaps in investment. So my first question is to you, Doctor. We are aware that Sri Lanka will have to collaborate to bridge the gap to fulfill the need for realizing the NDC. Sri Lanka has a fantastic NDC that you all have committed to. So what is your roadmap and how do you plan to fill the gaps?
Thank you for inviting. We have submitted updated NDC, nationally determined contributions in 2021, and then of course based on that we have NDC implementation plan, and then there are 15 adaptation sectors and 6 the mitigation sectors where we work with, and then on top of that we recently just before COP we finalized on net zero 50 roadmap and strategic plan, which is I think which is the very important output, and so it has actually studied all the sectors, the emission levels and sequestration levels, and then how each sector could contribute and then how we could reach net zero. So, so that's, and also now this is climate crisis, but then we think in terms of opportunities of climate crisis. So therefore, we also produced a climate prosperity plan. It's about, when you take CPP, about 70% we talk of renewable energy. So that is based on climate crisis, without going with the begging bowl, how we could prosper environmentally and economically. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question is also to you, because I'm going into the different industry after your questions. Now, in terms of capacity building, what role do you see public-private partnerships can play to increase the capacity to achieve the ambitious targets that you have set for 2030?
Yeah. In fact, when you take UNFCCC three pillars, the United Nations Convention of Climate Change, the three pillars are the finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. So the capacity building is very important, and the climate advocacy is very important. So of course, government cannot do alone. It has to be across the society, especially the private sector. But we know that the capacity building is not up to the mark. That's one issue. So that is one reason why recently this climate change office was also established, as an overarching body. So we work with the private sector together, and there are a lot of projects going on in climate change area, in urban areas as well as outreach. There, of course, we need to talk to people. One big problem is generally we talk of climate change in English, right? But then the overwhelming majority speak Sinhala and Tamil. So we don't talk in Sinhala and Tamil that we have identified. So we have to reach out to these people. And also the capacity building or climate advocacy per se will not work, and we have to sort of take it in certain, economic, formulas as well, right? For example, if you are talking about alternative wetting and drying, which is not really not much known in Sri Lanka, where we use a lot of water for paddy farming. So if you ask farmers to use less water, they will never agree. But then if you can show them the benefits, or also if you can, when you use less water, there are technologies where you can measure the methane emission reduction, and then certain portion of benefit going to the farmers, then of course they will like. So I mean, therefore this capacity building, climate advocacy is a thing that, which has so many facets, and also high level also, when it comes to capacity building, the sectors, the government, the private sector, capacity building is also very important, but also that is connected with technology transfer as well.
Thank you. Moving on, 50% of the revenue from export comes from the apparel industry. Many of us don't realize that 10% of the emissions, carbon emissions in the world, is from the apparel industry. And for Sri Lanka, 50% of their export is apparel industry. And a huge percentage of the population is also involved in the apparel industry. And 80% of the workforce in Sri Lanka is in the apparel industry. In the apparel industry is women. So it is affecting women directly because it's 80% of the workforce. The raw materials, especially the cotton, synthetic fibers like polyester, they have a significant impact. And you use large amounts of land, oil, the production process like dyeing. It's a lot of chemicals. Water consumption also in the apparel industry is a huge concern because we are seeing water shortage already. It's only going to get worse. So at present, what are the initiatives that the industry has taken?
Thank you, Meghna. So I think a bit of perspective here. So within the Hydromani Group, as with a number of leading companies, we've now working on our overall emissions thing through the SBTi protocol. And when we look at our emissions, and this is ours, but it's pretty much in line with the industry. If you look at the total emissions in producing a garment, there's around 17, maybe 20% that happens in scopes 1 and 2. So that is what is under our direct control. The largest part of it, over 80%, is in scope 3, which is what is happening behind us in the supply chain. Just for context, within that, I think the cotton and extraction from the soil accounts for about 12%, the raw material manufacturing process around 50%, and then there's another 10 or 12% in logistics support. If you look at the total chain of a garment, it actually changes significantly because you then have around 40% that is happening post-consumer. So this issue, and this is where I think this is a timely intervention in talking about regional cooperation, because our raw material base is very much in this part of the world. So what we are seeing now is two things. One is that there is a move to verticality, to do more fabric in Sri Lanka. This will have two impacts. One is you take out that 12% or so of logistics in the raw material supply chain, so you bring that closer. And then if it's within your control, it then becomes a little bit easier. So there's quite a move to look at that. I think the other piece that's really useful that we look at is when you look at the different types of raw materials, they have different impacts. So, synthetics have more issues on emissions, cotton has issues of taking water out of the ground. So that mix is also something that changes where you are having these impacts. So I think the key thing is that the fact that there is greater cooperation, the fact that we are looking at this, we are now measuring it and looking at trying to see where the impacts are. So on a manufacturing basis, we obviously look at water, we look at waste, we look at energy. Those are our three big channels. But a large part of that does include talking to people, education of people, because as Dr. Jasting said, a lot of these conversations are held at a certain level, but we need to be taking these conversations down. So we also see a role in ourselves in educating people and giving people the tools with which to deal with it.
Continuing on that, so this is the data that I just pulled out from the net. As humans, we discard 92 million tons of clothes-related waste yearly. What can be done to create a cradle-to-cradle cycle?
So this is one of our biggest challenges, because globally apparel, the raw material comes from the Far East, the manufacturing is in Far East and maybe Asia Pacific, the consumption is in the West, and the waste ends up in the West. One of the things which is now fortunately being stopped is, garments just being shipped to Africa to sit in a landfill. These are things that are just environmentally completely unsustainable. There's a lot of work being done in terms of trying to see how you break the finished garment back down into some form of a fiber or a yarn so it can be utilized back in. Again, the problem here is twofold. One is the technology piece sits primarily on the Western Hemisphere. And if we were to look at replicating this in the Southern Hemisphere or on the Eastern side of the world, you then have to ship all of these garments halfway across the world. So this is the biggest challenge that we have, is that, to be able to create value, to be able to create real value out of that waste, you would want to be able to break it down into a raw material that happens. We have some excellent examples in Sri Lanka. So it's a company called Eco Spindles, which takes plastic waste and converts that back into yarn, and then that yarn is put into garment form. But the challenge is to be truly circular. So when we design product, we look at what is going to happen to it at the end of its life. But unfortunately, the ability to bring it all the way back into the supply chain is still limited. There is an increasing consumer movement on, wearing used clothes, exchange programs, and so on. But these are just peripheral. This is not going to. It's really great that that is happening, but this is not going to change the world.
The next industry that we wanted to talk upon was agriculture, because that's a huge percentage, like we said, more than 50% of the workforce. And my first question to you is, with specific relationship to tea plantation, what strategic actions have been introduced to mitigate climate change? The second question is, how do we increase women empowerment? Because it again says that if women are educated, the same amount of education given to a man and a woman, 20% yield is more when a woman is educated. So I just wanted your answer on that.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. When I look at the tea plantation industry, I'm happy that all of you all will be getting some Ceylon tea to take back. I think the English tea shop has done that, so thank you to the English tea shop. So looking at the whole tea industry, I want to start by talking about board involvement. Because one of the things we take for granted is that everybody understands the climate emergency and everybody understands climate change. And that is not the case in terms of making sure that everybody involved in the organization is first aligned. So I think the first initiative that we have taken in terms of most of the boards that I operate in is to first get everybody up to speed with what is happening with the climate emergency. And I think the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report was the document we used in the last 3 years to make sure that every board member is fully up to speed with the subject. So I would say initiative one was that, because otherwise, talking about the impacts of climate change in terms of any industry is not going to resonate if the board fully doesn't get up to speed with it. The second target group that we aligned was in terms of getting C-suite also up to speed with the subject. Once we had achieved those two things, we then looked at our plantation. I mean, I'm now talking about a company called LPTA Plantations, which is one of the most profitable plantation companies in Sri Lanka. Those of you who are familiar with the tea industry will know Sri Lanka has a cost of production of about 92%. And that is already we are on the back foot on day one. So what we looked at was, how can we now reduce that cost of production? And the initiative that we started was, we had 14 plantations and 14 factories with 14 roofs. And what we did was, from about a 4% mini hydro electricity contribution in the plantation at LPTA, we moved it. Within 2 years, we got all our 14 factories with solar power. And a cash outflow of about 40 million per year on electricity. I'm happy to report that now we are earning 60 million as opposed to having a 40 million outflow. So I think that was the first initiative that we took to make sure that we got the board aligned, C-suite aligned. Then we launched the whole program on accelerating renewables in the country in terms of the plantation sector. And I think that has really had a catalyzing effect in terms of the industry in Sri Lanka, because everybody began to realize that this was an easy win that we could get into the system. I think besides that, I think what we have done also is diversified our crops. So if we were just a tea plantation company, today we are in palm oil, we are in a whole bunch of other areas. And I was just telling Dr. Anil that we've expanded ourselves in precision agriculture. into the whole berry cultivation side. And that is going to be one of our future exports. So I think the key strategies were these. In terms of women's empowerment, I think I could probably share something on the apparel sector, which we initiated some time back. And I think you're having Mr. Mahesh Amalian speaking to you all later on in the day. At MAS Holdings, we created a program called Women Go Beyond. And the project was launched to empower the apparel worker to move up in her terms of their careers from simply being apparel, in the bottom end of the story to move into management and move into senior positions. So I think that project has been very successful and been globally recognized. In the tea industry, I think it's a greater challenge, and what we have done is understood the impacts of climate change on our workforce and tried to circumvent some of those areas. So I think I'll stop at that. Yeah.
So I want to follow up with one more question. What actions have you all taken, or what strategies have been put in place to increase the resiliency? Because we never know when the temperature rise may happen, and they may lose their whole produce that particular year. So what actions have been done to improve the resiliency in the region?
So the plantation sector is in the front line of climate emergency, because extreme weather incidents come in three formats. You can either have droughts, you can have massive flooding, or you'll end up with crazy temperatures. So all three of them directly impact the plantation industry. And in terms of resilience, I mean, there is no question of anything but adapting to these issues, because there is no question of preventing these issues as global temperatures move up, because we've already seen global temperatures now crossing a pivotal point of 1.5 degrees centigrade in the next 3 to 5 years. So what we have done is invested in the area of precision agriculture. And precision agriculture, number one, uses 90% less water than normal agriculture. I think the previous panel talked about water. Water is going to be a factor for global conflicts, because we have only about 3% of the world's water is fresh water. So, and almost 70% of that is used in agriculture. So one of the things we've really invested in is moving into the precision agriculture side, so that we are protected from these three climate emergencies, and we are also reducing our water footprint as a company. Yeah.
So, Dr. Anil, coming to more on a public sector, like he said, a lot of people do not understand the idea of climate emergency because it doesn't directly affect them. Unless it directly affects you, it becomes a personal issue, and then you take action. Otherwise, it's always somebody else's problem. So similar to how we see, we heard in e-commerce, there's so much of technology or media awareness or, reaching out to people. What can the government do from the public sector to make this an understanding by every single person in the country, as every citizen should understand that it is his responsibility also to play a role in mitigating climate change?
Yeah, I think I partly answered this question earlier on. I think main thing is mainstreaming. See, now if you take our sectors, they haven't, leave alone the general public, right? The sectors, even they have not really realized, and they are not, some of the sectors have not mainstream. They have to mainstream, and then they have to use their budgets, right? Because it's climate emergency or climate change is not one sector's or somebody this thing. So every sector must work on it, because they are the experts. They know what's the sector and how you make profit and how you lose and what climate change. So we are there to support the government and the private sector and the civil society to make further understand and support them. But then our strategy is to emphasize on sectors to work with their workforce and the public.
So I would like to close our session in terms of this and open it up to the audience for one or two questions. So I guess we'll end it, and I do hope that more women are in the board as decision makers in climate change policies, because you do need a different perspective, and then only we'll get an equitable economy. Thank you.
Just stay there for a moment. We have some gifts. Actually, I had to look up this paper to remember my wife's name, Marguerite, because I've been absent so much, and I also wanted to look up Shika to come, because I think their husbands have basically been working on this for the last 3-4 months, and you gave me the right word, on the more equitability and recognizing. So please come and hand over these gifts. Thank you.